What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. This is one of our home team episodes. It's going to be Gabe. It's going to be myself. It's going to be Dennis. It's going to be MDV. On today's episode, there is no MDV. He's on the mend. He had a surgery recently, but he is doing well. But we have the great, the powerful, the infamous Dennis Marshall with us today. And Dennis, whenever I'm with you, even through the microphone, I feel like I'm getting stronger. So if you're listening to this podcast right now, you're instantly getting stronger just by hearing the voice of Dennis Marshall.
albeit with a terrible microphone and terrible audio. So I've heard.
This morning, I'm training, and a buddy of mine, I told Dennis this story. A buddy of mine, he's like, "Hey man, I love the podcast. You, Gabe, the home team, whatever." He's like, "But I got to tell you, man, like Dennis, he's awesome. You got to ramp up his mic because it sounds different than you and Gabe." And I'm like, "All right, so we're getting you a new mic and we're going to make it happen next week."
$19.95 on Amazon. This thing was.
Hey, you know what? Balling on a budget. I get it, man. I'm trying to do all that kind of stuff too, but we got to get you the same mic as Gabe and I, so we all sound the same.
All right, right on.
All right.
So good. So let's start with Den. You're jumping into the arena, man. This is exciting news. I want to hear all about it.
Yeah. Well,
Trump, huh?
I am so fired up for this right now.
Well, you guys is kind of planted the seed, right, with the High Rocks. And so I started tinkering with the idea of signing up for one of those. And then I thought better of it and considered it for a second and slept on it. And I said, what the hell am I going to sign up for a High Rocks for? Like it's
yeah, I don't want to run 8K.
It's the antithesis of things I enjoy doing for the most part. Like, what am I going to put myself through to train and get prepare for it? Like, I'm thinking about the hours spent running, and I'm just like, and this kind of switch flipped in my head, and I was like, I don't know how much value I am going to put, at least for the time being, into like developing weaknesses, like really trying to hone in on things that I'm not just that good at anymore, rather than just embrace strengths and the things that I naturally have always been good at. And so I said, well, what's the flip side of the High Rocks, and what's something that I'm actually good at? And I'm relatively strong, and I enjoy training that way. And so the idea kind of sparked to sign up for a strongman competition. So that's what I did instead of the High Rocks.
Have you ever done one before, Dan? No, right?
No.
Like strongman competition? No. I know there's been like some sand events and stuff that I think we've done together. Maybe not, now that I'm thinking about it, because you never did like Wadapalooza or stuff that we did where they had sandbags and stuff.
No, I mean, obviously I was exposed to that stuff through CrossFit and competitions in CrossFit for sure. But I mean, to the extent of that was basically sandbag cleans or carries. And that was pretty much it. And a little bit of yoke carry at the CrossFit Games. But outside of that, most of the movements are going to be fairly new for me.
Dude, when I saw that on social, or Gabe messaged me or something like that, I was so excited, dude. And I'll tell you why I was so excited. I was so excited for a variety of reasons. But the biggest reason was when Gabe and I had been talking about like setting up benchmarks and setting up competitions and like kind of training towards goals and staying inspired and whatever. Gabe was like, yeah, I don't know if Dennis ever is that kind of guy. Like I don't know if he ever signs up for stuff like that. I mean, I don't want to, that's not verbatim, but what I gathered from what Gabe was saying was like, you're not that guy. You're just internally motivated. You don't need to have these things lined up in the future. Was that right, Gabe? Weren't you saying that before? Or was that MDV?
Well, I mean, I know Dennis pretty well. I mean, I've known Dennis for a long time. And I remember like there was the crew that always wanted to sign up for the next CrossFit competition, the Wadapalooza, the whatever. And Dennis was always just like, it's just like, not that guy. Some people are, some people aren't. Yeah.
And so when he was saying that to me, I'm like, all right, that's cool. And like, dude, obviously you train hard. You're in great shape. Like, you got your family. I'm like, there's no point of us like pushing too hard, right? We want to encourage, but not like, it's kind of like this pull, don't push, whatever. But what do you think it was when we were talking about it? Because I didn't think we like hard sold you or anything, but we were just expressing like the benefit of training towards a goal. What do you think it was that maybe inspired you to sign up for something? Because like, when's the last physical competition you've signed up for?
The 2018 CrossFit Games.
Dude, so that's remarkable.
Yeah,
that's remarkable. I mean, I think that's awesome. So, here it's been 7 years or so, or give or take. And like, what do you think it was that drew you to wanting to compete in something now?
peer pressure from you assholes.
I was expecting something like a revolutionary, like, well, I walked outside, I had an epiphany, and then here it is, peer pressure from you assholes. That's awesome. So with Strongman, I have limited exposure to the Strongman. I mean, I have some general ideas, but what is your particular competition going to entail? Do you know the events, or are they going to tell you like regular, right beforehand?
No, they release them ahead of time. They set like the standards for, as far as the loading that you have to be prepared for. Yeah, it's like there's a natural. I'm just familiarizing myself with the whole strongman universe right now. So outside of like watching Bill Kazmaier on ESPN and Magnus for Magnuson, like my experience with it from a competition standpoint is fairly limited, other than just seeing what you guys probably see on the internet. So. But I found one. There's a natural strongman, I guess, organization that runs sanctioned events, and they have like a world natural strongman competition at some point throughout the year that you have to qualify for. So this is like a qualifying event for the national natural strongman competition, I think, based on what I read. So it's like an East Coast qualifier.
And is it by weight class then? Age group, weight class?
It's age group. They have a master's division, so I'll be in that. It's 40 plus.
Okay.
And they have in the master's division, they have heavyweight and lightweight. So I think lightweight is anything below like 200 pounds, so I'll be in the master's lightweight division.
And just to clarify, when you say natural, when I think about natural versus gear, there's a few ways I look at it. One is obviously steroids and tested. The other is like wearing gear. So like. Right. Are you not allowed to wear gear, or are you saying you're not on testosterone and drugs?
Yeah, you're saying, so they test you, you're drug tested. So natural means no performance enhancers, or at least banned ones, substances. And then there are specific gear requirements, not requirements, but limitations. They tell you what you can and cannot wear for every given event, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So you can wear like certain types of knee supports, and knee wraps are not allowed for certain events and things like that. Yeah, I mean, you get to the upper tier of strongman. I mean, they're not testing those guys, but then also the gear that they're allowed to wear is pretty significant, just given the loads that they have to prepare them, to be able to lift. At this setting, I think it's going to be a little bit more, kind of raw in nature as far as what you can actually wear and equip with.
And I'm trying to think things that like we've trained together. I've seen you do, obviously heavy sandbag stuff, the yoke. We did that last time I was in New York. That was a lot of fun, very humbling. What movements? Is there anything that like you like is going to be completely new for you that you haven't really messed around with?
Yeah, I mean, one of the intriguing and maybe attractive component parts of this particular one that I signed up for was I'm fairly familiar with most of the movements that are going to be in it. But there's a log press, which I've never really messed around with a log. I've played with one maybe one time, just light. So I don't really have any experience with that. There's a dumbbell, circus dumbbell press, like one of the really big, heavy dumbbells, which I don't know how different that necessarily is, other than from just pressing a regular heavy dumbbell or kettlebell overhead. But I don't really have any experience with that. And then aside from that, it's all stuff that I'm pretty familiar with. It's yoke carry, deadlift, sandbag to shoulder, the overhead stuff. Oh, an axle clean and press, clean and jerk overhead. Yeah. Which I don't really have much experience with that.
Do you have, because the axle, the hard thing about that, I trained that pretty extensively for a while, is that you can't get your thumb around, right? You're in a suicide grip.
Yeah.
I trained quite a bit with the log and also with axle in preparation for the CrossFit Games. I spent quite a bit of time with some strongman guys that were helping me.
Yeah.
Would you have all the gear?
I have an axle. I have sandbags. The only thing I don't have is the log and the circus dumbbell. All
right. Well, I'll tell you what. How do I want to phrase this? Let me think about how I'm going to phrase this.
You're going to send me a log?
I'm going to send you a log. And, I'll tell you what. Listeners who are enjoying this podcast right now, this is a gift from all of us who are enjoying this content. And it is a gift to you for putting yourself out there and for training hard and getting after it. So if you're listening to this episode, we are all gifting Dennis a log. We're gonna ship him out one. And all we ask from you in return is if you could leave the podcast a rating and review and let us know what you think about the show. It helps us out. It grows the podcast. So anyways, our gift to you is a new log, man. We're going to ship one out, man, so you can train hard with it.
But don't send me a log. Please don't send me a log. I can. There are people locally that I can go visit and train.
I'm sending you a log, and so are the listeners. We are sending you a log. It just sounds terrible when you say it.
Yeah, there's got to be a better way to say that. But yeah.
Oh man.
All right.
Dude,
thank you in advance, but I don't need it.
It's coming your way. It's already being sent.
That is fantastic. Dan, now you have to win. How competitive do you think this is going to be? Do you have any idea? Like, are you going into it with like?
I have no idea. I'm going in blind. I have no idea.
When is it?
It's in the end of February.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah, it's in New Jersey. Yeah, it's quick.
This episode might be coming out like when it.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say like, oh yeah, dude. It's like in June or something. Dude, you got like, oh man. All right.
A few weeks. I got a few weeks.
I love that though, bro. You're getting ready. I was Googling jiu-jitsu competitions because we were having a conversation this morning in the garage about it. And I'm picking one. I'm doing one. I just got to pick the right one. So, dude, shout out to you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, right on. I mean, and I will say, just to speak to it, like immediately, like the second that I made the decision to sign up for it, like the focus in my training just like immediately sharpened. Like it was like a switch went off. It's well worth it.
And again, I think that the important thing to highlight about everything you just said, because it's awesome that that's the case. You still, and I think a lot of people are in seasons in their life where you have to be selective when you even want that focus, right? Because that focus also like takes resources. It takes more like now energy, takes more, time, like both intangibles, intangible, things that you can be dedicating in other areas of your life. So it's not to say that you always, I just want to clarify that I don't think that you always have to have something you're training for. I think that if anything, that's something that I could benefit from the pendulum swinging the other direction and really like enjoying training for what it is and just like having seasons where like I'm just doing this because I love it and because it makes me healthier, not always having the next thing that I'm training for. Because like to give you a perfect example, I'm no longer running the Houston Marathon, which when we're recording is this weekend. I was talking to Dennis about this, but for a while I was like, like really hoping that like if I just rested it, the pain would go away. And it's like, I would say it's like 90% better. But then like, you say it out loud and it's even dumb to say out loud. Like my first run back is going to be the longest run I've ever done by 8 months. Like it doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. It's dumb. And I think that in many ways I've struggled over the past couple of weeks to like, well, what am I doing training wise? Like, what am I doing? Because I don't have a very clear plan that I'm aiming for. And I don't think that should be the case either. I don't think that I should always need like, hey, I'm training towards this thing. I think that there's definitely a part of me that can benefit from just enjoying exercise and training, getting in the gym for what it is. Having said that, I do enjoy having these things down the line and having a little bit of that, carrot to chase per se. But I think that that's important too.
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Yeah, a little bit of both. I have a question, Dennis, as the author of our Force Track. This morning, basically every morning, I get together with the group of guys and we train hard. And today I did the workout as it's written, with the exception of I took out the rest because I just wanted to, kind of throttle it up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so I did sets of 6 with tempo shoulder press into it was a 20-minute EMOM, but I ended up turning into a 15-minute EMOM because just the way we were structuring it, where it was 1 minute max strict pull-ups, 1 minute max push-ups, 1 minute max tall box jumps. I did 30 inches and we rotated through, right? The group of guys. And it was great. I loved everything about it. My question for you is this. We're on the shoulder press. And as you know, for a set of 6 with tempo, it was written 3-1-1, 3-1 dash, X1. So it was, kind of relatively fast on the way up, no real pause to the top, slow on the bottom, rinse and repeat for a set of 6 for 6 sets. And the way Dennis wrote it was kind of starts moderate and then works your way up. Mm-hmm. So I'm setting the stage here. For me, I found a weight that I thought was like perfect, man. I got up to, I think I was like at 150, give or take. And when I was hitting those last couple sets on the way up, it was very difficult. I got to like right above my forehead and I had to like kind of drive my forehead through and barely lock it out. I mean, barely. It was perfect. The tempo on the way down wasn't that hard. But the guys and I were having a discussion. I'm wondering, with your vision of that, one of the guys, he had X amount of weight on. He got through 4 reps and he couldn't get the press. And so he just put the rack back, right? So, but we're at the tip of the sets, and he was pushing, right? But on the final set, he did a push press, got it up, and then was able to get the tempo on the way down. So I'm curious, when you're looking at these workouts and you're designing them, would you prefer for someone to fail at rep 4 on like the super heavy difficult, or get a little bit of body language, get a little bit of push press, and still get that tempo on the way down?
I mean, there's probably benefit to both. I don't know if there's one is necessarily better than the other. Yeah, I mean, like the whole idea of like cheated reps. There's another term for it that's kind of I can't think of it right now, but that's been something that people have been implementing into their training for decades. It's not a new concept. Like, you take something to technical failure, the muscles that are responsible for generating the force and moving the weight and doing the work fail on you, and then you recruit other muscles to assist just to get a couple extra repetitions. That's a method that's been used forever. So that's absolutely fine. I mean, I think you run the risk of potentially, if you do it all the time, blurring the line between actually performing the movement the way it's designed to be performed, and then like cheating yourself all the time, but of course, too many reps. So I would say that both methods are fine. One is not necessarily better than the other. I think it would be appropriate to mix and match and utilize both of them in your training.
Yeah. I mean, basically, I said it just not as eloquently as you just did with the guys. I'm like, yeah, bro, like, dude, we're just trying to put the weight up. Like, my mentality has definitely shifted, obviously, over the years. Like, if you had gotten me in like deep CrossFit space, I would have, made sure that we connected with the shoulder press and didn't get the knee, because it was such a judgment, right? Like, in terms of like when you're actually at a competition, if your knee bent. Do you remember that one year they did the thruster? And if you took any step of any kind, you basically got a 0. Remember that one?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I remember at regionals.
Yeah.
Right. It was regionals. Yeah. Yeah.
It was regionals.
Jen, my wife, she was competing that year as an individual, and she, on one of her reps at a very manageable weight, her foot just shifted. Her toes just went like that, and they no-repped her. And I think when we did the math at the end of the day, that prevented her from making it to the games. Dude. Because she just had a terrible score on that particular event. Yeah.
I remember when Tony Budding or whoever it was came out with the rule, I thought about it more, right? So the rule was your feet cannot move at all. So you're on this thruster ladder, and I think you had to clean it, right? You had to clean it.
Yeah, it was from the floor. Yeah.
It was from the floor. So you had to clean it, set up, down, up, over your head, full range of motion thruster. But what would happen is if you took a step at the top because you lost your balance, whatever, that rep would not count. And I remember thinking to myself, like, that sounds stupid. And then I thought about it more. And what they were trying to avoid was people rebending underneath the bar and doing like a thruster jerk, right? Yeah. And anytime you step, your knee has to have some type of flexion in it. And that was their reasoning. Yeah. And so anyways, man, I practiced the shit out of that because I didn't want to get no rep on, at 200 pounds when I shouldn't have.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be able to make a distinction between like what is going to be accepted in competition setting and what standard you need to prepare yourself for versus like what's just appropriate in everyday regular training. If you're just trying to get stronger and fitter and improve your conditioning, like those two things oftentimes don't match up. And if we encounter it all the time at like teaching the level 1 course, people have all these questions around movements that are related to standards. And like you're looking at it from the wrong perspective, like because they're associated. The way that they were introduced to CrossFit perhaps was through watching the competitions, and so that's how they think that the standards are dictate how you perform all the movements. But the standards are just standards because it makes the movement easy to judge and it holds people to a level playing field. But that doesn't necessarily coincide with what you should do in training all the time.
How do you, Dennis, how do you square that? And Jason, I'm curious your perspective too. How do you square that with like improving fitness in CrossFit being about, increasing, work capacity, and you not being able to measure that if you're not holding a standard? Like that's the other side of why standards are important in the CrossFit methodology, is because if you do Fran today and it takes you a certain amount of time and you do Fran next time, but the reps are different, how are you measuring if your work capacity has actually increased? What's kind of like the thought process there?
Yeah, I mean, if that's important to you in terms of actual seeing objective, measurable progress, then yeah, you have to uphold a specific standard so you can compare apples to apples over time. And that's one metric of progress. It's one way to track your progress and whether you're getting fitter. It's not the only way. I mean, there's a lot more variables related to whether or not you're making progress when it comes to your health and fitness than whether or not your Fran time is improving. So yeah, it just depends upon what perspective you're taking, what context you're training within, and what goals are most important to you, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, of course, you want to uphold a certain standard. It shouldn't always be different as far as the standards you uphold yourselves to with respect to specific movements. But what I'm saying specifically is like the standards that are upheld in a competition setting. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be something that doesn't necessarily always coincide with what you need to do in your training.
For sure.
Right. Yeah. The way I like to look at it, and especially like at the men's club, I'll give you an example. I work out with them, so I don't coach them, right? I mean, but before we get into a movement, I might be like, hey guys, this movement looks like this. I don't know, Bulgarian split squat, or this movement looks like this, jumping onto a thing, or this movement looks like this. And I'll just demonstrate an air squat. I'll be like, guys, when you're doing an air squat, when you're doing a push-up, like you do you, but let me explain why you want to get the depth, right? Just work the full range of motion to really increase overall capacity. Like, I don't want you just to develop here. I want you to develop full range. I just like you do you, right? Like, but explaining to them, like, there is benefit to expressing it in a full range of motion. But if that's not something you could do today, or if it's not something you even want to do today, like, just do you, man. Like, I'm just happy you're out here at 6 a.m. on a Saturday to crush a workout. So that's kind of how my mindset has shifted. Whereas before, maybe I would have been like, hey, those are no reps. Now it's like, it's a rep or a no rep. It doesn't really matter as long as you're out here crushing it,
No rep, like, your buddies in the garage.
Yeah, like, dude, I put up a video a while ago doing some burpees, and like, it's inevitable. Nowadays it's gotten better, but there would be times where I would put up workouts and I'm just like in the garage training with some guys, and someone will have to say, hey, those are a lot of no reps. It's like, dude, get the fuck out of here, man. Like, we're just like, I'm not at the CrossFit Games or a regional event trying to compete against other people. Of course, there needs to be a standard there, and it should always be the same, because that's you're competing. But if you're not competing, you should just be trying to express the full range the best you can and get in your best workout. That's the way I look at it.
Well, one example that I can think of too, like squats, for example. Yeah.
Sure.
We encourage the idea that you get your hips below parallel, you stand all the way up to full extension at the top, right? But if your primary goal is related to hypertrophy and building the muscle, there's a very good argument that you shouldn't stand all the way up at the top of your squats.
And you keep the tension. Exactly,
right. And that'll be the case across the board with almost every movement that you perform. And so it just depends, like, if you're in a bodybuilding gym and you're no repping Tom Platz for not standing all the way up on his squats, who has the biggest quads in the history of the world, like, obviously you're missing the boat on something. So yeah, it just depends. It depends on the context and the goals of the athlete.
Yeah, shifting my training has opened my eyes to so many of those things, especially for me, because I was never in the gym before CrossFit. Never. Like, I was an endurance athlete all my life. I avoided the gym like the plague. I joke around with Dennis that I wish I had, my teens and my 20s back to go and spend some time in the gym, but it wasn't what I was doing. So for me, it was very eye-opening to start training that way after everything we just talked about in the CrossFit methodology. And that was the only thing that I knew when it came to lifting any sort of weights, and then realizing how valuable it is to do stuff like no lockout squats, to do stuff like, half reps at the end of a session because that's all you got left. But hey, that's how you progressively overload from last week when you were able to do 12, but now you can go 15, even though the last 3 aren't quote unquote full reps. Like, there's been so much value to that stuff. And I think that also for a lot of people, a lot of men specifically that I know want to put on muscle, the thing that they're missing is the effort in their sessions, really, not so much like, hey, you have to make your lateral raises look more strict per se. I think that's where people are missing the boat a little bit on stuff and almost trying to be too strict when it comes to, like, you just have to load a lot of these muscles more than you are, a lot more than you are.
Yeah. Dennis, I want to give a quick shout out to you and for everyone listening. Like, if you're not utilizing, I mean, I'm a big fan of force. obviously Gabe, I feel like actually on the last podcast we were on, Gabe threw me under the bus. So I'm going to throw him I'm not going to throw him under the bus, but he basically didn't give me a rose and told another guy that he's going to be his partner at a High Rocks live on a podcast. It was a total smack in the face. But so we got the authors of Flex and Force here, and I like both programs, but I definitely, gravitate towards the Force. And as of recently, I've had to kind of been adjusting my mindset the last little while, where the way that the program of Force is programmed is that it's not like smash your face every day. And it's been hard for me not to want to smash my face every day. It has. And it's been difficult. But I will say, and maybe it's because I'm eating right and I'm not drinking, whatever, but I feel really, really good. My body feels good. I feel athletic. I feel dynamic. And I feel like it's been a really good blend for me of what we're doing in Force, with some days that, like even today, for example, that EMOM, max push-ups, max pull-ups, max box jumps. I wasn't at like a 190 heart rate, right? Because you're getting muscle fatigue. I was trying to do 10 strict pull-ups, 25 good push-ups, and then 14 box jumps on a 30-inch. That was my goal for the rotation with no rest. I like those kind of workouts as of lately. So yeah, shout out to you, Dennis.
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty well established. I mean, there's going to be anomalies to this, but and exceptions, but for the most part, and you're probably an exception to most rules, but like for the most part, training should have these high-low, like a high-low kind of method, right? Like one day is going to be super high intensity, the next day is kind of lower intensity, the next day is higher intensity, and should have this ebb and flow up and down. And that's how you can kind of continue to sustain relatively high intensity work long term. If every day is up here, high, smash yourself, eventually something's going to give. And again, there's going to be outliers to that, but for the most part, that's going to be the best prescription for almost everybody to continue to see progress.
Yeah.
And Dennis, on that note, taking a more kind of bird's eye view to it, do you see some value for most people to also periodize their training? Like, for example, doing 1 cycle or 2 cycles of flex and then doing force, and kind of like big picture in the year, having times where you're doubling down on these different goals where you're like, right, anaerobic, more CrossFit style workouts, and then going in time where you're like not really doing that stuff and doing more hypertrophy stuff, maybe long aerobic stuff. Like, is there value for that for most people? Is it just kind of personal preference, or is that something else that you think you would recommend to the average person that just, again, is training for relative aesthetics, health, performance, all of that stuff?
Yeah, I guess it's individual. I mean, I think psychologically there's benefit to just changing things up, like a clear philosophical change in how you train over the course of a few months and then switch it up to something else. Just psychologically, that can be refreshing and allow you to come back into your training with a little extra motivation, a little extra fire under your ass. Like, I think the benefit largely probably lies in that. I'm sure that there are going to be physiological reasons as well, as far as just providing a different stimulus to your body for a period of time, and then kind of step away from a specific stimulus and then reintroduce that again. There's probably long-term benefits to that style of training as well. But I think it's largely individual. I think most of the benefit would probably be psychological.
Yeah. Because I'll give you an example from literally this morning. I've been training exclusively with like our flex programming and running programming that I've been doing training for this marathon up until like 3-4 weeks. I haven't been running because of this injury, but so primarily I'm doing like either long, easy runs once a week. There's something that's a little harder, but running alone, I think is so different than like obviously high intensity, mixed conditioning, mixed modal cross type stuff. And this morning, now that I decided, hey, not doing this marathon anymore, next thing on the calendar is the High Rocks that I'm doing in March, shifting my training for more specific that stuff. And I woke up in the morning because I do my runs, my conditioning exclusively in the morning. I try and get it done before Shay wakes up. So I'm up early. But dude, going early and I ended up doing like a little, like it was 5 rounds, 500-meter row, 15 wall balls, and some walking lunges with the sandbag. Like waking up to do that, especially since I haven't been doing it versus like going out for like a long run with a podcast. Dude, I was dreading every piece of it. And in the middle of it too, I was just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, and I know that there's like some physiology there too of like what your body's prepared for that early in the morning and waiting for your core body temperature to like raise a little bit as part of your circadian rhythm to do more high intensity stuff. So I was probably feeling that. But from a psychological standpoint, yes, it's exciting to kind of problem. And now it almost like big problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I think ultimately it's like all these questions around training, what is like optimal? Should we periodize? Should we not? Ultimately, like whatever program allows you to get excited about training and train hard. Like there's inspiration and motivation behind your sessions. There's focus. You're excited to do it. You put as much effort as possible into it. Like that's the best program because all the nuts and bolts around reps and sets and should I go to failure? Should I not go to failure? Should I use my legs? All that stuff is like relatively unimportant compared to just the effort that you put into your training. So it's whatever, like, you know, in my example, like the thought of preparing for high rocks, I just had this sense of dread. And yeah, there's probably all these benefits that you could list as to how I would benefit from working on things I'm not good at and the discipline that would be required to like prepare myself for the race. And yes, all those things would probably have a lot of benefit. But ultimately, it's like I just didn't feel like doing it. And I would be half-assing my training sessions and slogging through it and be dreading it. So I'd rather like focus and prioritize my training around things that I'm excited about and are good at, quite frankly, at this point.
For sure, man. For sure. I mean, just being excited for whatever's coming up is such a big deal, obviously. And I think that that's where a lot of people get tripped up, where, especially with social media and a lot of the stuff that's out there, like you almost like want to do what it seems like other people are doing or other people that are getting results that might seem like the results you want to get. Cause that's the other thing about, you know, social media and everything that's out there is like, you don't know, like they might seem like they're rocking and rolling on, you know, all aspects, but like, you don't know if that's the case. So it almost feels like you should do that. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's like whatever fires you up. I think we lost Jason, but we'll just keep it going.
Yeah. I mean, social media, you know, I always have to remind myself it's a highlight reel.
Oh, dude.
You know, over and over again, because you get lost in like, yeah, I should be doing that too. And then I'm like, wait a minute, this person might be just completely miserable as they're doing this. And they probably didn't even do it. They probably just like filmed a clip of them doing a couple reps of the whatever workout they said they did, and they didn't actually even do it. Who the hell knows, right?
We had someone on the podcast, and this is crazy, completely believable. Like it won't surprise you, but it's still like ridiculous to even think that like that was a thing, that is saying that he knew someone, he didn't name names, but like influencer, like well-known, like I don't know if we would know them. It was more like, it seemed like entrepreneur circles.
Yeah.
But that literally bought a cold plunge, has a cold plunge, and does it, but like fakes it 100%. Like either like goes in for 2 seconds to get the pip, but he's like, I don't want to do that. Like that sucks. But meanwhile, is still putting out the fact that like, you know, do this, like discipline, whatever. Right. And it makes you think like, how many people are doing stuff like that with everything, with like with their training, like reading books, like journaling in the morning, like all this stuff that you see. And I think that to me, like I've fallen victim to like, oh, like, you know, a lot of people journal or have this thing, like, you know, I should start doing it. And at the end of the day, I think that like morning routines and habits and stuff like that, it's very similar to training in that like should be something that like in some way excites you, like in some way, like you're fired up to do it because you're going to be consistent. Because otherwise, I've found myself doing all these like little things, whether it's like, you know, journaling or downloading like a meditation app or like, you know, doing this thing with a calendar or whatever. And I do it for like 10 days and then I don't do it. But I have found like the different things that like now have stuck, and they've stuck because it's just like my version of kind of trying to do the same thing. And all the examples I brought up are like having some sort of like mindfulness practice, which I've struggled for a while, and like finding the thing that sticks and that I will do. But now that I have it, now that it's actually something that I do with Shay every night, and it's been like involving him in it. And the fact that now he'll even be like, you know, like we'll prompt it, hold me accountable, and we do it. And now I have the thing. But for a long time, it was like, you're just looking at people on social media and being like, like they're successful, they do this, like I should probably do it. And it's always an uphill battle. It's such a loss. Yeah.
Let me copy that.
Yeah. Jason, well, I mean, like internet went out, but he'll be back on.
Yeah. So like one just quick example I can think of, even in my own world, like I put a post up this morning of just my training session, and the amount of time I went in looking at the videos that I filmed from the workout and editing just like to find like the best reps that I could post on social media. It's like embarrassing. Like I'm ashamed of myself of how much energy and time I put into like, oh, this is the best looking rep right here. This is the best lighting where my arm looks the biggest. So I'm going to put this one up. And like, so now just take that one small example times a billion, and that's social media, right? It's just like this. Yeah. So it's not real life. It's not real life.
No, it's not. But like at the end of the day, like it's also kind of I don't want to say it's like a game you have to play, because obviously you don't, but there's real benefits there. There's benefits to getting, the word out on what you're doing, to providing value, to building community, to building a business, like whatever it is. Like it's such a necessary evil. But yeah, man, I mean, you can get sucked into it 100%. I mentioned this on a podcast with Jason. I don't think, did I tell you that I bought that brick thing to help me with my screen time?
Yeah, you said something about it, right?
Yeah. So it's this thing, and it's been good so far. Like it's funny how much just the additional resistance. So it's like a thing that you actually have to tap your phone on to unlock it. Like you can't unlock it unless you go, and I have it in the fridge in the house. So and you can have different settings for it. So I have like a family time setting, which also blocks like Slack and email. And I'll use that for like dinner and nighttime so that I'm also not on those. Then I'll have a work setting, which will block stuff like Instagram and YouTube, so that if I'm here in the office, like I'm not seeing that stuff. And then I have a gym setting, which essentially only gives me Spotify. And it's been huge just because I have the screen time app. Like I've tried to use that, but it's so easy to just hit a button on the phone and be like, ignore for today. But the additional resistance of like, I mean, am I really going to go into the house and unlock my phone so I can like scroll on Instagram first? Like I'm not. And then you're just like, you're so much more. It's crazy how much time you waste when it's that accessible. And I know that some people listening would be like, man, do you really have to go that far and buy this thing? Like, dude, I mean, I do, like it's an issue. It's an issue that I'm trying to work on.
Send me the link, please.
You're gonna get ads about it anyways right now. By the way, sorry, gentlemen. I don't know what happened, but I'm.
Oh no! Apologizing went out again. Dan, I saw you wearing a belt on your lift today.
Yeah.
Is that your back is like specifically active? You mentioned something about your back. What's going on there? You've been a big no belt guy. That's why I ask.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I almost playfully play up this idea that I never wear a belt. Like I've worn a belt before, and I do think there's utility in wearing a belt.
You're the one who told me that you walk up to 500 pounds and you don't think anything of it. And since, every time I go up to deadlift, I think about you.
I don't wear a belt when I deadlift. I've tried it a couple times, and I never really understood how to use it properly when I deadlift, because I feel like it loosens as I bend over, and I can't quite figure out like how to create the right pressure using it. So I've never used it deadlifting. I've used belts and when I'm squatting, like if I'm compressing my spine, I like the support that it provides when you're trying to like make your trunk as big and as stable as possible. So in situations like that, I'll throw it on. If like with sandbag cleans to the shoulder, which is what I was wearing it for, just the amount of pressure coming down on the spine unilaterally like that is super awkward. And my back has never felt great when I do those. Even like relatively lighter, just because like the rotation component to it, I think also. So I strapped it on just to have a little extra support. But I don't wear a belt from the context of like consistent with our last conversation of like, this is going to prevent me from getting hurt. I think it makes me feel stronger, and I'm able to utilize and lift more weight when I'm wearing it. So in that, I think of it as a training tool to be able to lift greater loads, really, more than just like protect my back.
What would you, like in a nutshell, the recommendation for the average person out there with maybe gear in general? And I'll give you a clear list, so maybe you can like prioritize like the utility of this or like whatever. Knee sleeves, lifting shoes, belt, and grips.
Grips?
Straps?
Grips like for your hand, to protect your hands?
I was thinking straps.
Straps, like lifting straps.
Lifting straps.
I mean, listen, I've always had like a minimalist approach with all that stuff. I think when you're, especially if you're like relatively new to training, you should try to avoid using that stuff as much as possible. There's going to come a time when you reach an intermediate phase or a relatively advanced phase in your training where you've kind of earned the right to start toying around with using some of that stuff. And there's I think individual scenarios where some of those things make a lot of sense right from the jump. Like something like a lifting shoe. If you have awful squat mechanics, if you're really limited in your mobility in the lower body, and if you don't have some support in the heel to maintain good mechanics in when you're loading up a squat, I think you would benefit tremendously right away by wearing them. Straps, obviously, if the loads that you can start to deal with and handle are greater than what you can actually hold on to, then there's going to be benefit in using those. Knee sleeves, I would say it's the same thing. If you start to achieve a level of strength where it makes sense to have some support for your joints, just in terms of like sustainability and longevity and training, then I think that makes sense as well. But for the most part, I would encourage most people in most scenarios to try to avoid it until it's like absolutely necessary. What was the fourth one? Was there a fourth one?
No, that was all four. You got all four.
Yeah, I mean, like some of the stuff, taping, and I mean taping. Yeah, you got to support whatever. You beat the shit out of your fingers with training and stuff. But like the grips. To speak to grips.
You mean not to rip your? I mean, it just depends. I mean, dude, I remember a time where I had a full bag full of stuff because I'm trying to do whatever I can. Thumb tape, grips, Ollie shoes.
But going back,
leather belt, nylon belt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, training. I mean, listen, for someone in that scenario of preparing for CrossFit competition at the highest level, you need all that shit. You need as much support as possible. And I mean, and any competitive setting. If we're talking about competing in something, in like a strength sport, a fitness related event, yeah, you want to support as much support as you need to improve your performance as much as possible. Makes sense. For the average person in their garage training for everyday life, like I would say you should take a minimalist approach when it comes to all that stuff.
Same thing applies.
I need you to talk to my son about his baseball game, dude. He has so much gear, bro. So much gear.
Way of the world now, man. I know.
Oh man. Every time I go over, Caden has something new to show me. It's got like it's got the sliding mitts, the batting gloves, the new bat. We're putting tape on the bat. He gets so excited about it too. And the thing is, and the thing, Jay, I can't imagine too, once Jay gets to that age, like they get so excited about it, like I get that like some of this stuff is unnecessary, but like, man, just at least maybe because he's not my son, he's not, spending my money. Like I genuinely enjoy when I'm at your house, like talking to Caden about his baseball gear, because he's just so fired up about it. Like dude, so fired up.
Okay, next time you come over, he got this new thing that protects his thumb now. So, dude, bro, the amount of stuff. And then
so he's been around for a long time.
Dude, he had this because he's a catcher. He has this pine tar that he puts on the thing, but now they have it in a spray. So, dude, bro, before he goes up to bat, he's like in the corner, putting spray paint on his. It's just obnoxious, man. The amount of shit he has. For any dad who's got a son playing baseball right now, they know exactly what I'm talking about. The amount of gear in baseball is just obscene.
Yeah, they're just trying to emulate their heroes, exactly. Right? That's all it is.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
I mean, like, when I was a kid, that meant like trying to. I used to try to hit like Gary Carter, the catcher for the '86 Mets. He had this very like distinct stance when he batted. And I spent so many hours in my backyard trying to like get the exact Gary Carter stance. And so, I mean, like, and it's the same idea, just applied differently, right? You're just trying to emulate your heroes.
God, it's so funny. It's so funny how you see stuff that's in the pros. Like you see all the kids trying to do it. And yeah, now like you look at the pros, like baseball players have like a pad everywhere. It's like a foot pad, an elbow pad, like a outside of hand pad, like all that stuff. And it's definitely a look, like the look of the baseball players changed. They're like super bright colors and stuff. And yeah, you go to like the games, like when I went to Caden's game, they all look like little professional players.
Right,
Dude,
right.
it just goes to show how it transfers down from the pros, how they're so influential, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
these kids wearing like 3 different necklaces,
Oh,
they're all and you're like, where did they get that from? And they get it because nowadays, especially for the youth, dude, like YouTube is a thing for them, and they see like their quote unquote heroes rocking this gear, and they like it. They identify with it, just like kind of CrossFit early in the day. You'd be walking around an airport and you'd be able to identify someone with a pair of nanos on, or now I don't know, maybe if you're interested in jiu-jitsu, you could watch the way. Whatever, name the thing, and they start catching on. So,
I mean, I remember back in the day, people would show up like at the gym, or like I would see that at level 1s a lot. Like they would very obviously trying to look exactly like Rich Froning. Like it was like a look.
He had like, I think he had Galatian. I don't know what he had. Galatians, right?
Yeah.
And then he would have the most common thing was the headband.
The headband, the spiked, like the spike hair.
Yeah, the headband, the spike was like
it was a look, like wristbands.
Well,
that was the Rich Froning look.
Rich snatched. I don't know if it was 300, but I remember there was this video. Everyone will remember it. That was in the CrossFit space, and he did it without his shoes tied, and then everyone had their shoes untied.
Yeah.
Like it was there was a while where there was untied nanos was like part of the look, and it was 100%. Literally, you could point it back to that video.
For sure, 100%. Yeah.
So funny.
Human nature, right?
Oh man, yeah.
Monkey see, monkey do. Monkey see, monkey do.
Dude, no better than Matt Mertzky in the 2008 CrossFit Games. Dennis, you were at those games, right?
I was not there at that one. No.
Dude. I mean, I haven't talked about this in a while, but I'll never forget, man. Just like you said, monkey see, monkey do. I'm watching this guy, and he's doing the squat clean and jerks, and he's dropping it from his shoulder height. He's bouncing the bar bounces. He's able to catch it in a front rack position squat and then press overhead. So he bounced it off the ground, caught it into a front rack. Like he never took it off the ground, right?
Right.
And I'm watching him do it. I'm like, wow, this looks so efficient, because he's like bouncing the bar. It's gaining like 2 feet because these plates were really bouncy. And I'm like, I'm going to do that. And then as soon as I said that, Dave's like, none of those reps counted. And
right,
he had to go back to like 0. But anyways,
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a trend.
Yeah. The original cheater.
Oh, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Gabe, did you want to talk about
2 things?
how I'm no longer an alcoholic?
Yeah, I wouldn't word it like that. But yeah, no, so you texted me the other day, right? So we're all doing the things that are in the Train Hard 5 nutrition protocol, which I'm super excited about. I've gotten tons of message of people following what are honestly very simple principles, but I think the beauty is in the simplicity, because hopefully this takes away a lot of the noise that's around nutrition for people. So again, just focusing on protein, being consistent, not trying to be perfect. 3 meals, like being very regimented with meals, not skipping meals, and not setting yourself up for failure at the end of the day. No alcohol, at least until you hit your goals, at least until 12 weeks, and then using that to help reestablish a new normal, a new moderation with that. And then the 5th one being the weekly progress pictures and how powerful that stuff is. So those are the 5 pillars of that. But you texted me the other day and you were saying that you're feeling great because you've been cutting out booze.
Yeah, no, I mean, dude, yeah, I mean, I was totally joking. I probably shouldn't use that word, but I was totally joking about being an alcoholic, obviously. And that's a real thing and people struggle with it. But for me, it was, what I would say is like, it was difficult because I'd probably have, I don't know, 3, 5, 7 drinks a weekend over the weekend, like nothing crazy, but like a couple here, a couple here, a couple here, in general, right? Like 3, whatever. And I never had any inclination to like drink more than that. It was just like, social thing. And I felt like if I'm at somebody's house and they're like, hey, what do you like? Always the first thing is like, hey, what do you want to drink? And I always felt weird not wanting to accept something. And I felt like anyway. So yeah, I mean, I've been finding mocktails. I've been just having I was having Arnold Palmer's, whatever the kids were having the other day. And like, it just hasn't been as big of a deal as I thought it was going to be. And so, we're only, a couple weeks into doing this, but still it's made me wake up in the morning and feel better on those Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, because typically I'm always training hard. I'm always doing jiu-jitsu, always. And so if I have a few drinks, normally I don't think anything of it, but it actually was affecting a little bit on like my jiu-jitsu. And so I haven't felt that the last couple of weeks. So it's been great. So
that's cool. And I appreciate you sharing that, just because I think that a lot of men specifically, people in general, but men specifically, fall into that bucket where like it's definitely not an issue. Like no one would say that it's an issue in that, like, hey, like this is really something that needs to be addressed, but like you don't know what you don't know and how good you can potentially feel. And my goal with, hopefully people cutting this out is exactly the experience you're having. Cause now, I mean, I don't want to assume or put words in your mouth, but assume that like now this information is going to play into that even past this, to where it's going to be less than what it used to be. Like if you want to go roll on Saturday, maybe Friday is going to look different, even beyond these 12 weeks, because you're like, hey, like I really like that feeling of feeling super good. And at least now you have that information to make decisions in the future, versus like, I never thought anything of it. So you don't know what you don't know.
Well, and the mocktails are like a real thing. I think what my learning lesson is so far, yeah, of course, is my sleep a little bit better? Sure. Yeah, my roll is a little bit better? Sure. Okay, kind of. But it was my own personal like insecurity or whatever it is, where I wanted to fit in. I want to feel like I'm connecting with people through this shared experience, and I thought that they would judge me for this, right? Because I'm obviously like that guy already, and now it's like, okay, now you're really that guy where you're not going to have a couple drinks or whatever. But incorporating mocktails has been cool because there's so many options of that now, where you could feel like you're enjoying something and sharing like, oh, dude, this is actually really good, or you could have a conversation about it and not feel like you have to participate in just alcohol. And I think that's been the biggest mindset shift for me the last few weeks. And I'd recommend other people trying it too, like even like the non-alcoholic beers. There are other options out there that allow you to
so many options.
Yeah, that allow you to like converse and like discuss and feel like you're partaking without having to like feel the effect of your heart rate increasing or feeling a little bit shitty the next day, or whatever. And by the way, I think that we're having a really real conversation about this, because I think a lot of guys fall in this category where you can go out and have 3-4 beers and it's no big deal. Like you're not going to go to 10, you're not going to whatever. But I think that if you do that over and over and over again, you'd be surprised at how it's holding you back from the results you're looking to get. And if you could just back it off just a little bit and switch it out, I think you might see some real success.
And I've always been like personally hesitant to talk about this stuff a little bit, just because sometimes I think that like if you say, hey, I don't drink, it comes off as judgy. It comes off as like a little bit of like, well, great, like you don't drink, you're trying to like impose that on us. And so that, because for me, we mentioned this on a podcast a while back. The last drink that I had was a shot of this disgusting liquor that's like really traditional to Chicago. It's like when you go to Chicago, it's like a some kind of flavored liqueur. Anyone from Chicago will recognize it. It's like a thing you have to try. And when we were at the Two Brain Business Summit, I had already kind of like stopped drinking. And this all literally just stemmed from Ariel getting pregnant. And in that period, she wasn't drinking. Honestly, I would say that 99% of the time that I go out, it's with her. So she wasn't drinking, I wasn't drinking. We did that through her pregnancy. And then we were just kind of like, it never felt like something that we needed to do again. So it wasn't like a line in the sand then that I was like, oh, we don't drink anymore. It was just kind of like we went out to eat and we hadn't done it for 9 months. So we were like, I mean, I don't feel like I need to do it again. Meals were cheaper, like we felt better, whatever. So we just stopped doing it. And I remember that at Two Brain, when a bunch of people were just like, oh, you got to do this shot, you got to do this shot. I 100% did not want to do it, but gave in to the peer pressure of it, just because it was this moment of like, it's always awkward and very tough to be like the one guy that's like, and the tough thing about it was that I hadn't yet, like, I wasn't in a position to say I don't drink. Essentially at that point, I was just like, I don't want to have this one drink right now, which makes it hard to say no. Does that make sense? Like, it's easy when you're just a guy that doesn't drink. All you have to say is like, hey, I don't drink. And people like 100% back off. Probably because they like make assumptions of like, oh, like you're sober, maybe this was an issue in the past, whatever it is, but people leave you alone. But when you're just like, no, not in the mood today, like whatever, the pressure kind of like, it's like, come on, like whatever. And it's easy to continue to get that. And I had the shot and I felt so shitty. I felt shitty because I did something that I like 1000% just did not want to do, and only did it because I like gave into the pressure of it. And like, it was gross. Like, it wasn't even like a good beer. Like, I enjoy the taste of beer.
No, it was a shot. It was like dude, I don't even remember. I remember that. But it wasn't even a shot of like a good tequila, of good whiskey. Honestly, things that like I
would say that to some extent I enjoyed before. Like I enjoyed when it was something that like, wow, that was surprisingly smooth. Like this was just gross on like all levels. And I remember that flipped switch in me. I talked to Ariel about it when I got back from that trip. I was like, I really just don't enjoy this anymore. And I think that like I personally, at least, and I haven't like signed it off forever. I'm sure that at some point, some like special occasion, like it'll call to me to like enjoy a drink again. But I made the decision then, and I was like, hey, like, I mean, I don't feel a need to do this. And sure, there were like a couple times we got together with family after that where there was a little bit of like, oh, you're not going to have wine, whatever. But like now it's gotten to the point where like our family just knows and they don't even offer us, and it's just kind of whatever. And it's been, I don't know, that to me has been, I wouldn't say like a life-changing change for me or whatever. Like I definitely wouldn't say that, but it's definitely been a positive net, I would say. And it's just made social situations like easier for me. I don't feel like I need to do this thing that like I just personally don't enjoy. I know a lot of people genuinely enjoy it and it's not an issue at all. So I've always been hesitant to share that. And I was even hesitant to like put it into this, nutrition thing, but I do think that it's at least valuable figuring out like what this potentially could feel like. And then after that, kind of like reassessing what that looks like. But the whole reason I wanted to share that is I 100% understand, it's a big reason that I made this shift, how powerful the social pressure can be. Like it's crazy.
Well, there's
like,
a lot of options right now. You have CBD drinks. You have ones with like different types of mushrooms in it. Like there are a lot of other options, but alcohol for people who are interested in exposing themselves to those things.
Dan, where do you fall on the alcohol situation?
Yeah, I mean, I have not really regularly consumed alcohol for a really long time now. There was just a point where I stopped feeling good when I drank it. I just didn't like the way I was responding to it. It wasn't even necessarily like a hungover kind of thing the day after. I mean, certainly it would disrupt my sleep. I didn't like that. But even like in the moment, I just didn't like the way it made me feel. I just got like dopey and tired, which I guess is kind of the point. But it wasn't like a happy dopey. It was like a stupid dopey.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just didn't like the way it made me feel. So I generally just don't drink it. I mean, I rarely find myself in situations where I feel pressured. So that certainly helps because I don't have any friends. So when you don't have any friends, you don't find yourself in social situations where people are pressuring you to drink. I mean, Jen's not a drinker. My wife's not a drinker. Every once in a while, if we go out to dinner or something, we'll maybe get a drink. It's not even like a guarantee that we will. It just depends on the vibe and how we're feeling. So I'd say all in all, I avoid it. I'm not afraid to tell people that I'm not going to drink if they ask me for a drink or regardless of the setting. I got used to like, I would say, I've heard you guys talk about this, like kind of like unhealthy obsession with being healthy. That was me for many, many years, going back like 15, even 10, 15 years ago. So I got quite accustomed to like being the guy at a family gathering that wouldn't eat the bread, or the guy at dinner that would like push away the bread bowl, or just wouldn't eat this or wouldn't eat that. And, I developed that muscle pretty adeptly, like a couple decades ago at getting comfortable with being the person that refuses to eat certain things or drink certain things. So for me to say to somebody like, hey, I'm just not drinking, it's for me, it's not really that big of a deal at this point. But yeah, I generally avoid it. More than anything now, I just again, like I don't feel great when I drink it. And I don't like the fact that it messes up my sleep. I'm like obsessed about sleeping well.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because you talk about that unhealthy obsession with being healthy. I could relate. I always kind of had some checks and balances because of my family and Ashley and whatnot. But dude, you can get wrapped up. But I do think alcohol is one of those things where like, bro, you should go out. I mean, this is just my opinion. You should go out. You should go celebrate. You should go eat whatever you want. You should go do whatever you want. You should eat muffins galore. You should do those type of things. And I think you should. And I think that if alcohol is a part of that and you want to go out and just kind of like rage it out, like, I don't know, like go for it, dude. Like I'm not going to drink until Ava's Kitchen. Then chances are I'm going to have quite a few drinks there. And that's just the way I'm going to live my life. Right. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it should be something that I should feel like obligated to on a regular basis. It should be something that I want to do, not feel like I'm having external pressures do it for me, right? Like if I choose that I want to have a mocktail or a CBD or maybe even one of these mushrooms, or what if I want to try, or if in the future I want to have a few drinks, great. But right now I'm trying to like see like, hey, how do I feel? And it's like, then at least if you go to a party and you have like basically half the cake, it's cool, do it, right? But you probably are going to feel like shit. And so you probably shouldn't do it very often, right? But it should be your choice. It shouldn't feel like you have to like peer pressured into it. It's kind of the way I'm evolving my thoughts. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
100%, man. 100%. I'll share this with you guys. And I don't think any of my college buddies listen to this podcast, so they won't find out this way. But this year, which I love the fact that this is happening, but my college buddies that I swam with, organized, and I was like, I told Ariel, I was like, my friends want to do this, but there's like a 5% chance it's happening, but it like seems like it's happening. They got it together. They want to do an Ironman relay, a half Ironman relay. So it's 6 of us, and we're splitting up into 2 teams. So one's going to swim, one's going to bike, one's going to run, and we have like a little like fun bet on who's going to win. It's really an excuse for all of us to get together. Most of them live in New York. One of them moved to California, and we're all going to get together. And it's been years since we've like spent some time together. Like a bunch of us are dads, and well, 3 of us are dads now in the group, and it's just going to be a lot of fun. But I like, they mention it all the time, and like they're very much trying to like let loose. And I honestly, I don't want to, and I'm planning not to. But there's like a very like it weighs on me, the fact that I haven't like, I guess, told them yet, or like what their reception is going to be when I do it. And it's funny because even though I've made this decision and whatever, and I know that like there's no part of me that needs it to enjoy the time with them, but I'm like dreading the initial like, yeah, guys, like I'm just not going.
Yeah.
And that's like, it's a bummer that's like very real. Like I'm so excited for this trip, and it's so cool that it's happening. And there's so many positives that like, you know, we got our shit together after like years and are going to see each other and do this really fun athletic event of nothing else. They're all kind of like getting back into like wanting to be active, and this thing is getting them to train for it. It's awesome on so many levels, but that one thing is just like weighing on me to like, God, I'm like dreading it. And it's all in my head because, to your point, Jason, like I'm 100% sure that like, it'll be like a one-time conversation. I'll be like, oh, cool. And like, it's all good. But it's still like, I think about it like more than I'd like to admit. And it's funny how that stuff works, man. It really is. And I'm sure some people can relate to it.
I'm sure a lot of people listening can relate to exactly what we've been talking about the last, 20 minutes or so. And like, it's going to constantly evolve, right? But you have to kind of find what works for you, what works for your partner too. I think that's super important.
Huge.
Like you got to be able to have good conversations with your partner, because if you're on one side of the aisle or whatever, and they're on completely opposite, you got to be able to communicate and find a happy middle ground, right? And then maybe that'll evolve over time. But like, dude, if one person's all in and one person's all out, it's tough, man. And you got to communicate it effectively. So this should be a conversation we should have more regularly as my kind of journey, because we're basically in January, and I'm gonna be doing this for the next couple of months, right? And so I think I'll learn a lot, because I'm definitely coming from a background of someone who drinks more than anybody else we have on this show. So, obviously.
All right. So we're coming up at the end of the hour. Want to get to our physical challenge of the week segment. So this is gonna be really fun. So I figured out what the challenge is going to be for next week. But
you figured it out?
I figured it out. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm taking the reins on this.
Dictatorship?
Wait, I thought, do we already know what this is? Is it the one I'm thinking?
Maybe, but first we need to share our results from last week. So, Jason, what did you get on the 90-second max cal row?
Well, I didn't redo. We
no, yeah, I knew you didn't redo it.
What was it? 56, right?
56. Yeah. I got 51, and then Dennis still hasn't told me. He made me wait for the podcast.
I bet you he's gonna get 59.
5-0. One short.
No,
One short.
No way.
Short.
Wait, Gabe got you by 1 calorie.
I couldn't believe it.
That is absolutely brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, I think you need to
and I
check
can
out
see it like the final 30 seconds. Because you told me that you had gotten 35 in the first 60.
Yeah,
and I was at 34, and it was like just turning over to 35 at the. So I was like, I'm dead even, and I feel like this overwhelming, just like I mean, at the 60-second mark, that's when it gets real. Like, and my body just shut down, and I'm like pulling. I'm looking at the screen, and I'm panicking, and I see the number like continuing to get lower and lower with every stroke. And I'm like, I'm not going to make it. And I'm doing the math in my head. And sure enough, one short.
Mm-hmm. Is the air thinner in Texas than it is in New York? Did Gabe have an advantage with the thinner air, and maybe his rower was a little bit,
Probably.
Probably.
Dude, that's crazy, bro. Dennis, I know
is
you can get more
brutal.
than that. You got too much strength to let Gabe. You
you
got to
know-
retest that in a couple of weeks.
I don't know, dude. I melted on the last 30 seconds and I was giving everything I had. I think the only way would potentially be to come out
Even
faster.
hotter.
Yeah,
I mean, I thought I came out as pretty much as hot as I could. But I guess you'd have to just go like crazy for like 15 seconds. And like, I can't say that I went crazy for 15 seconds. I came out hard. But I think that's the only way I would make up calories because I was everything I had in the tank for those last 30 seconds and it just wasn't there.
When you do these kind of tests enough times, isn't it so fascinating how, especially when you like know you have the knowledge too of like understanding energy systems, but like the light switch that goes off, like it's so fascinating to me from like physiological standpoint, how at the 60-minute mark, it's just like that tank is empty and it almost like switches to the other tank and it's a completely different experience. It feels different. You obviously don't have the same power output. Like it is just night and day.
I don't know what that feels like. I felt pretty good. I thought I could have maybe kept going for 30 seconds.
That being said, I mean, I 100% think that you came out too like if you had to do this, if this was an event for regionals back in the day, and you
I would have gone out 100% the whole time.
Even if you were practicing it over and over, like I wonder what's realistic. I wonder like how close to like 65 even you could get to. But
some guys got in the 60s.
Yeah. I think over 60.
I saw that. Yeah.
I think 60 plus is, I said that on the podcast. I think 60 plus is totally doable.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You're a behemoth of a man. So anyway, I will pass the baton after this week. So Dennis, think about what you want the challenge to be moving forward. But for this week, I wanted to keep it with some of these force capacity tests. And I also want to get MDV involved. MDV should be able to do this. No problem. We're going to do the 2 minutes max strict pull-ups starting with a max set. Then I think, is it 2 minutes rest, Dennis, or 3?
2 minute rest. 3, I think it was.
Exactly 3 minutes rest. And then 2 minutes max push-ups start with a max set. So that'll be next week's challenge. Hopefully people listening will do it as well. Write down their scores, share it on social media. But again, it's in the app. It was in the app last week. But for anyone that isn't in the app, although you all should be, 2 minutes max strict pull-ups. But you have to start with a max set. So the score is going to be 2. It's going to be what's your max set and what's the total you got in 2 minutes. Then you rest 3 minutes. So then at the 5-minute mark, you do the same exact thing for push-ups and trying to see some videos because push-ups can get real sketchy.
So can pull-ups.
Yeah, I was going to say, how much body language we talking here? I mean,
I'm going throat to bar pull-up. I'm going throat to bar, just to be clear.
Throat to bar.
Throat to bar.
Wait,
like
throat to bar.
Yes.
No, you're not going to touch your jugular to the bar.
Physically touch my throat to the bar.
Stop it. Wait, what do you mean? Hang on.
I'm going to
your chin is up and you're going to touch.
I'm going to pull my throat all the way into the bar.
I need a movement demonstration because I feel like you could choke yourself out doing that.
You don't jam it into you just do a little tap.
All right, you could do that. I'm going to barely get my chin over the bar.
This one, do one of these.
I'll start with throat to bar. It probably will deteriorate as throughout.
Dude, well, guys, I've enjoyed this episode. I know I was kind of in and out with the internet, but always good catching up with you, Dennis. Congratulations, man. We will be sending you out that log for all the listeners as a friendly reminder. Simple ask, right? We have the hometown crew that jumps on here. We have, Gabe and I, we have guests. We have all different types of podcasts. Go back, check out the other episodes, hit on your next road trip, hit it when you're training hard, listen to the podcast, share with a friend. Definitely helps the podcast out, shares the message, and helps us build more capable people. That's the goal. That's where we're at. That's the mission. So, Dennis, Gabe, appreciate you guys. And we'll talk to you guys again soon.
Talking to you, boys. Yep.